All right. Thank you, everybody. This is Allyn.
So this is my first security con talk, so it's going well already for me. Hi y'all, welcome to How I Learned to Stop Worrying and build a modern detection and response program. Today I'm going to share with you a framework that will help you build a modern detection and response program. You'll come away from this talk with a better understanding of what your program should look like, how all the tools, capabilities, and processes should fit together, and how to analyze, build, implement, and evaluate so your program provides immense value. But first, hi, I'm Allyn. I'm a senior staff engineer at Airbnb on our technology leadership team. I work on enterprise security, threat detection, and incident response. I'm also a dad, which you could probably tell by my stunning dad shirt. I live in Austin, Texas with my wife and little 2-year-old Liam. We are here in a giant adult-sized ball pit where I almost lost him so many times. And this talk is, in a way, inspired by Liam. You see, I am a worrier. No, Alexa, not a warrior, a worrier. And being a parent and a worrier is a super fun combo. I remember when Liam was just a few hours old, barely a lump. I was sleeping on the little hospital cot they give dads when he was first born, and he was in the bassinet. And I was listening to him breathe because I'm paranoid. And I noticed that his breathing started to sound a little different. And I started to worry. And so I got up to look at him. And as I was taking a closer look at him, I noticed that his breathing was not right and that he was struggling to breathe and his face was turning purple. But I knew what to do. I had a plan. I did that online parenting class that I did during COVID. I paid attention. I took notes. So I flipped him over in my hand and pat, 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 pat. And then he spits up and starts crying, but he's breathing again. He's fine. Liam gifted me something really important that day, and that was perspective on my worrying. And I realized that worrying can be a superpower. There's this kind of interesting research paper out of the University of California called The Surprising Upsides of Worry. And in this paper, they argue that while worrying, especially at extreme levels, certainly has negative outcomes, but there's a really cool upside to worry. And here's a quote from the article. Worry illuminates the importance of taking action to prevent an undesirable outcome and keep the situation at the front of one's mind to ensure that appropriate action is taken. And when I read that, I said, oh, hey, that's exactly what we do as Blue Team. Worrying brings a unique skill to detection and response. We're constantly thinking about what could go wrong, but we need to make sure we have the knowledge to take action. And here's where I see lots of programs fail. Now, I've been doing detection and response for well over 10 years, but I didn't start here. I started on the red team, where I watched blue teams fail time after time, which if you're on the red team, you know what I'm talking about. It's troubling. And when I switched over to blue team, I started working in detection and response. And I found that myself and my peers, while we were experts at accomplishing the technical work, none of us had any idea what a detection and response program should look like, or that we should even have one. And we just did tasks and projects ad hoc without a bigger picture or strategy in mind. And I believe this is one of the major reasons blue teams fail. We're taking lots of action, we're really busy, but we're really making it up as we go, or just copying what we did at our last organization because it kind of worked there. And so after a decade of making lots of mistakes and building detection and response programs at different types of companies, I've taken all the lessons I've learned and I built a framework that finally worked for me. And I believe it could help you if you are a blue teamer, you're looking to build your detection and response program, or if you are on the other side and want to be able to help Blue Team build, this way you can learn from my mistakes and make better, more informed mistakes than I did. I learned something else when I became a parent. Everyone has lots of advice for you, and some of it is useful, but a lot of it is not. The reality is that you have to kind of figure it out for you and your kiddo. But I found that the advice that I got that was the most helpful was less prescriptive and more general guidance, and was especially useful if it had resources and tools with it. And so when I thought about what I wanted to share today, I thought about whether this was a methodology or is this a framework. And some of the characteristics of a methodology are that it's prescriptive, it tells you exactly what to do, steps are systematic, you have to do them in a particular order. There's not really a lot of room for creativity or customization. Your outcome is consistent. Now, if you compare that to a framework, which is super loose, flexible, leaves room for other approaches, it still provides most of the processes and guidelines required to succeed. But in the end, you get to choose what works for you and what you want to use. And while you do end up sometimes with inconsistent outcomes, I choose to present this today as a framework because every organization is different. Everything has different lines of business, areas of risk, technical capabilities, and I want you to be able to apply this to your organization. That means as we go through the framework today, think about what you would personalize or customize for your organization. Right off the bat, I'm going to give a couple of caveats about what this framework won't tell you. I'm not going to tell you to go buy tool X. I don't think one tool or many new tools are going to help. They might help, but you're not actually solving the bigger problem. And I'm also not going to tell you what the best SIM, EDR, SOAR, XSOAR, XDR, whatever the new fancy category is. I'm going to tell you that your organization needs a robust and comprehensive detection and response program to fight modern day attackers. But before we talk about that and how we're going to implement this framework, I want to give a little historical context, how we got here. So the 30-second version is that back in the late 90s, early 2000s, we start to see the concept of the SOC start to gain popularity, Security Operations Center. And these originally spun out of something that's been around much longer and where I originated my career in the Network Operations Center in the NOC. And initially, SOCs were almost exclusively focused on your antivirus. We got some IDS and firewall. And then the tools start rolling in over the next 2 decades. We got SIM, we got UEBA, we got threat intel platforms, we got CASB, EDR, cloud starts taking off. And we've got all these alert sources and detections. So we have to buy some SOAR and data lakes to automate and investigate. And in just hearing that brief history, there's been a lot of advances in our tooling. But even if you have all those new tools, I believe a lot of organizations are still operating in a legacy model. So let's talk about what I mean when I say model. A legacy program is reactive, where the focus is on alerts that indicate something already bad has happened, and where your goal ends up trying to reach that alert queue 0. You want to get to 0 alerts. That's the goal here. A legacy program focuses its strategy on technology. Are you doing this? When you describe your program, do you find yourself talking about all the tools you own and the vendors you do business with? Or do you think instead about the capabilities you have or how you empower your business to reduce risk? And a legacy program has a lot of manual heavy tasks. We've kind of been sold an idea that automation can be a one-size-fits-all, and I think that's kind of failed us in a lot of ways. And so you may have invested in automation tooling, but you and your teams are still doing a lot of day-to-day tasks manually, so it didn't really work out there. And finally, and personally, most unfortunately, legacy program operates siloed and disjointed from the rest of the organization. This puts your teams completely out of touch with the org and its technology. it inhibits your team from working side by side with other partner teams, and you end up investing time and money into solving problems that would probably be solved better in collaboration with other teams. On the flip side, a modern program is proactive, and this doesn't mean that you just do a thing called threat hunting. It means that your philosophy for detection incorporates the idea that you want to detect a threat as early in an attack as possible, and there's many indicators that you can correlate before you get that something bad has happened alert. And instead of being so tool-focused, a modern program builds strategy that is business-focused, and by that I mean we empower our teams with more than requirements, but also with the context of what they're working on and how it empowers the business to reduce risk. And a modern program prioritizes automation. When we're implementing processes, integrating our tools, we're thinking, how will I automate this? Instead of creating manual playbooks and sure hoping you get back to automating that later. It won't happen. And finally, a modern program is connected to the business. It centralizes its functions, workflows, and data. You can't succeed if you try to go at this alone, siloed off in your own little world. You'll never scale. And some of you are nodding your head. Some of you are saying, yeah, but I also know that some of you are thinking, what about all the challenges in my way? And I know them all too well. It's the alert fatigue that's grinding you to a halt. It's your lack of a budget to get the tools you need to succeed. You can't hire, you can't retain talent. It's difficult, and it seems like you're never gonna get out of firefighting mode. Incidents just keep coming. And no, that's our life. I haven't slept in 2 decades. And just so you know, these are the exact same challenges that every detection and response team face, okay? Like, you're not unique. And so no matter where you are on your journey, and whether that is you're building from the viewpoint of being a CISO or director, you want to understand what a modern detection and response program should look like and how it fits into your overall security program. Or if you're a manager, building processes and hiring people, executing this type of work, or if you're an engineer or a PM and want a better picture of how all the tools, capabilities, and processes you're implementing should be operating or integrating together. Or if you're just interested in learning about detection and response, this talk is for you. So now that we've got some background, we know where we want to go. Here's what you're getting out of this talk. I'll give you the framework that I use to guide you to being a modern program, methods to help you measure and report on how your program is detecting and stopping threats. And along the way, I'll share the lessons I learned about empowering teams to succeed and overcome operational time sinks. And with all good frameworks, this one is based on work done by people much smarter than me, although I'm fairly certain none of them ever worked in security. We're going to follow the process of organizational design. What the heck is organizational design? Well, Gartner defines it as the process of creating structures that align roles, workflows. Hold on before you doze off. I read the book. You don't have to. We don't have to talk about it. This book here laid out a step-by-step process for designing your organization. Now, they had 7 steps, but I simplified the 7 steps because the folks in the back row would be taking a full nap right now. So I crunched it down to this, and this is the 4 phases of the framework that we're going to walk through today. We're going to analyze and assess our current state. We're going to design and develop our ideal program. This is where we're going to spend most of our time. We're going to talk about when it comes time to implement, how we overcome operational challenges, and finally, we'll evaluate and report using metrics that tell a story of how this program is performing and narratives that sell it. So here we go. So to assess and analyze, we start by asking, where are we and what do we have? And whether you're joining a new team or have been recently promoted or tasked to build a detection and response program, or you want to level up your current efforts, the first thing you need to understand is your starting point. Do you have anything? Do you have skeleton processes and tools? Maybe you have a large program that reports detailed metrics. Now, at a previous job, a few weeks before I started working there, my boss-to-be mailed me this book. And I'm not really a big fan of business or optimization books. But this book has a lot of great nuggets on how to set yourself up to be successful and productive faster when you start a new job. And while not directly relevant to this talk, this book does give a really great tool we can use for applying a systematic learning process to understanding our current state. And the first piece of advice this book provides is that we need to stop. We have to stop doing and start learning. So no matter how long you've been at your organization, especially if you've been there a very long time, it's really easy to become overwhelmed and like inundated with your day-to-day operation stuff. So first advice is stop doing, start learning, and learning from 3 perspectives: past, present, and future. And for the past perspective, ask, why are things done the way they are? How has this program performed in the past? And how were goals set? And were they sufficient or overly ambitious? For the present, think about, are there reasons that we do things, and are they still valid? And how do people in the organization think about detection and response? And looking toward the future, are conditions changing so that something different should be done going forward? If performance has been good or bad, why was that the case? And what behaviors is the program encouraging or discouraging? And for each of those questions, we care about it from 4 different standpoints: people, processes, I added technology, and vision and mission. And as you're asking these questions from each of these viewpoints, you want to think about early wins, challenges and opportunities, and the culture. And before we dive into each of these viewpoints, I want to say that if you're starting with nothing, you've been given a gift. It significantly reduces complexity. There's not a lot of past and present to consider when designing, but the chuckle in the room made me definitely feel that we all feel this, that when we have something, it's way more difficult. So this step is really important. Don't skip past it. And so first we assess the viewpoint of vision and mission. And here we want to think about the following questions. What is unique about detection and response at your organization? What's unique problems does the culture, the tech, the people at your organization pose for detection and response? And then what are people spending their time doing? And more specifically, what could they be doing less of or more of? And then we ask, who? Who do we ask? Interactive moment in time. All right, well, stakeholders. Thank you. Saved. So you ask your stakeholders, who are they? It's legal, it's HR, it's your technology teams, it's your organization's incident management, it's your leadership, it's your partner teams, it's the red team, it's your corporate and production security teams, it's third-party risk, it's Bob who sits next to you. No, he's nice. He brings donuts. So here's a silly question. How do we ask it? It seems kind of, it is definitely a silly question. I don't use questionnaires ever, but these are questions that require people to think about it. So a questionnaire might be appropriate depending on your role, but you can definitely gather this informally. But no matter how you do it, the takeaways are, what are people doing? This tells you what the implied vision and mission is, which, by the way, is likely different from what's written down, if anything. And what does the organization need from detection and response? And next, we assess the viewpoint from our people. We want to understand what skills we have available to us as we're thinking about the processes and technologies. I'll put my manager hat on for this part of the talk. And the framework, the resource I'm going to point you to for this one is the NICE Cybersecurity Workforce Framework, developed by NIST, and it categorizes and describes different types of cyber work, gives you like a taxonomy, lexicon, and in NICE, skills are defined as work roles. There's lots of them, but I gave you a jump start, and I've taken all the roles that I think are relevant for detection and response. And then I grouped them into the following detection and response roles. And these are general roles. And I would expect you would have responders that are also detection and response engineers. And in fact, once we start talking about threat hunting, micro-purple testing, and detection engineering, you'll see there's lots of space for overlap. But I found these roles make it easier to talk about the skills needed without too much customization. And then to assess, I created a self-evaluation survey. Remember, I'm wearing my manager hat. And I asked my team to rate themselves for each of the nice work groups. So grab a work group, here's forensic analyst, and then ask each member of my team, rate themselves from no experience to total wizard. And then I can use all that data to create a heat map that visualizes the experience and skill sets on the team. So now you have an estimate of what skills you have, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and where you have gaps. And you're discovering this because this will help you make process and technology decisions before we start building, so that we know how to prioritize mentorship, where to target training, hiring, and retention. All right, great. Now we're going to talk in more detail about processes and start to design and develop. We'll talk more about the processes that I think should be in every detection and response program, but every organization is different, so you should capture what you have in place today. It might be something you want to keep in your process design. And you've probably heard of this one, but the Capability Maturity Model Integration Program lets you rate processes by their maturity, where the least mature is initial, where the processes are unpredictable, poorly controlled, and reactive. And the most mature is optimizing, where the focus is on process improvement. And then we rate each of our processes, maybe group them into general themes. And depending on your situation, maybe it's not great. It's worth calling out the Capability Immaturity Model, which is a semi-serious way that Air Force captain came up with as a way to evaluate dysfunctional organizations. My favorite is contemptuous, where it's defined as ineffectiveness has become apparent to the larger organization, but measurements are fudged to make the organization look good while they become more committed to their ineffective processes. Yeah, if you know, you know. Cool, so now we've assessed our people, our processes, and our vision and mission. Let's take a look at our technology. And before you start making a list of everything you bought, let me make something really clear. I want you to think about it from the viewpoint of technical capabilities. We've very much, especially in detection and response, allowed vendors and the companies that sell us tools to define what we need. And so with that said, this is my opinion, but I don't think product categories are helpful through this part of the analysis. So if you look at all the technologies relevant to detection and response in your organization, remember that technical capabilities are not product categories. So instead of writing, I have a SOAR, think about what capabilities you're actually getting from it. Maybe it's detection workflow automation. Maybe it's case management. Maybe it's incident escalation, forensic artifact collection. And as you capture all these capabilities, include the ones that you might not have use in today. And then also think outside of your own team's tool ownership and capability ownership. This could be what your team uses during incidents, maybe for messaging, ticketing, alerting. And that's it. Now you've got an understanding of what you're starting with, the historical context, and where things are currently trending. You did great. You stopped. You learned. Now it's time to have some fun and design and develop our detection and response program. And when I design and develop, I like to think about it like we're telling a story. Because stories are memorable. Our brains are wired to remember stories. My son is 2, so he obviously can't read. But he can recite this book, Leo Goes for a Swim, a classic, word for word. So having a mission and a vision statement is cool, yes, But when you start to talk about your program like you're telling a story, that's when it starts to resonate. So with that in mind, let's start designing and developing. And in this phase, we're going to create 3 deliverables. First, let's ask ourselves, what processes do we need in our program design? Because processes tell the story of what we do, and to better enable storytelling, we're going to build a process view. And this diagram gives us a visual representation of the processes within our program and how the processes interact with each other. This isn't intended to be an exact diagram. Remember, we're telling a story, and I'll start from the beginning. Our first process is threat modeling, where we build profiles of threat actors and gather intrusion sets to understand the type of threats that we care about the most. And the story I'm telling here is that our detection and response program is fueled by threat intel, where intel, both internal and external, is collected, analyzed, disseminated throughout our program, and whether that's in the form of threat briefings, IOCs, or hunt packages. The story I'm telling here is that I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We still need the classics. Event monitoring, triage, analysis, incident response, maybe forensics. The story I'm telling here is that we're proactive. Our intel, often from incidents, is used for threat hunting. Maybe it's as simple as looking automatically for IOCs, and then maybe you move into creative data analysis to uncover undetected threats. The story I'm telling here is that we continuously test and improve our program with something called micro-purple tests. These are tests that simulate threat techniques so we can validate what we can actually detect and respond to. And we use the results of those tests to prioritize improving our logs, detections, analysis, and responses to threats. The story is that continuous improvement is central to the program, and we use it to capture and prioritize the most important work we should be doing, including work that comes from threat hunting, like gaps found in our application logs. The story I'm telling here is that visibility has never been good enough. We want our data to be integrated with threat intel, with the context from our systems, our networks, our platforms. We want observability so that we can engineer detection rules that use observability to find known bad, anomalous, or risky activities. And threat hunting can be a great input to our detection engineering. And when our detections fire, our classic processes are prioritized to have automation, where we rapidly triage, analyze, and respond. And the story I'm telling here is that this program's performance can be measured, and that data is used to communicate how we're succeeding, improving, changing, and investing. And then we circle right back to the beginning, where our incident flows back into our threat intel collection so that we continue to inform the program about new threat hunts to do, threat briefings, and detections. And the great thing about a framework is that your story may be different. Maybe you see things completely different from me. But if we zoom out, we can see that our reporting and metrics can inform our red teams with new scenarios, our security awareness teams with metrics from phishing events so we can better educate our users, and our partner security teams that build and operate many of the controls that can help prevent incidents from ever occurring. Great. Now we've got some processes. Let's look at building our architecture. And remember, we're not going to list product categories. We care about capabilities. And we start with the process view because I think it's easier to think about what we need to do and then come up with the technical capabilities that we need to execute. And here's some resources that can help you think about capabilities. MITRE ATT&CK, which you're probably already familiar with, knowledge base of attacker tactics and techniques. And one way I've used ATT&CK is I'll walk through the tactics and think, what capabilities do I need to detect and respond to this? And then I'll think about that in all my different environments. We've got MITRE DEFEND, which was released just 2 years ago, I think, which is a catalog of defense techniques. So it can help defenders answer, what capabilities do I need to address specific techniques? And defend can be a little bit prescriptive, so it's not always applicable. But I think it has a really great definition of defining analysis techniques. Tynes has a SOC automation matrix that lists all these common activities that most SOCs want to automate. So I think it's a really great starting point. It covers things like alert handling, issue tracking, enrichment, user interaction, and it comes with some pretty good examples of how to automate. It also covers things that you might not think about automating, like documentation and change management, because you'll never document that on your own. And finally, there's Snowflake's detection series. This is a little bit more of just a shout out that I think it's worth a read. It connects the idea of detection, building, and software engineering. So I think it's a model worth examining. All right, so we get back to our process view, and this helps us to inform our capability architecture. So let's jump into threat intel and think about the types of data we'd like to be collecting. Threat actors, intrusions, maybe just raw intel from Twitter, but also actionable intel like early warning signals, dark web postings related to your organization, threats to your brand and reputation, credentials for sale. And then you have to think about, how am I going to collect it all, disseminate it, and integrate it across all my tooling for intel-driven detection. And if I switch over to the classic processes, I think about all the automated capabilities I'll need in blue that support my workflows to do triage and analysis. And similarly, the automated capabilities I'll need in red to do response. And then for my more engineering-focused and proactive processes, I think about when I'll need to get observability out of my logs, not just collecting, but normalizing, enriching, aggregating, correlating, giving them historical context, and then optimizing. I have to think about the analytics I'll need to detect threat behaviors and malware on endpoints and networks, cloud platforms, all of the things, and how I'm going to automate my MITRE attack techniques in all my different environments, so I know what detections are working where. And then we pull all these capabilities together, and yours will look different, and you'll prioritize differently. But then you can create an architecture view. And I've organized the capabilities in the groups that are closely related. And just like I discussed before, the headline for this story is that this program is taking all of our threat intel capabilities so we can enable intel-driven detection. And we do that so our threat behavior analytics, malware analytics, and micropurple test automation can be directly informed by intel. We take all that data and turn it into something our teams can use for true observability and engineer detections that generate alerts for automated analysis, which then triggers rapid response and automation across all our controls. And look what you got there. You've got your modern program with capabilities of observability, universally informed by threat intel, detections engineered with automated analysis built in, and orchestrated rapid response. And so now we know what work we need to be doing, the technical capabilities to make it happen. Now, what role-based skills do we need to run our processes so that we can build and operate our technical capabilities? And to do this, we come back to the roles we put together at the starting point, and we can use the ones that we got from NICE, or we can add and remove our own. I'll just mention one topic here, which is that I'm starting to see more organizations post very specific roles in detection and response, detection engineer or threat hunter. And I don't think there's anything inherently bad about that, but I do know that we humans, we don't like to be labeled in a way that limits our abilities. So I think about these as roles that people can move between. because people like to vary their experience, and separating roles from job title can make a teamwork work in a lot less siloed way. But regardless of how you slice it, you've got your processes, you've got your technical capabilities, you've got the roles you need to support, you can update your heat map and what's missing and where you might need to fill those gaps. And I can already hear the pessimists in the audience scoffing at my bright sunny day. Sounds great, but what about the lack of a budget for tools and impending hiring freezes? So let's talk about it. First, let me talk about making the most of the people that you have. When I first transitioned from being an engineer to a manager, my perspective really changed. I had to take a step back, look at the bigger picture, and I realized that in building these different views. And now I'm back in an engineering role, and I realized that those viewpoints are really most important for our engineers and the people doing the work, because those are the viewpoints and stories that tell our people what's the most important thing they could be working on. So when you hire people, or when you try to tell people that you're bringing into this new thought, they know where to best focus their time. And this is especially important for us operational teams, where it's easy to feel pulled in so many different directions. And if you're trying to build a new program but have a lot of historical debt, two approaches I found work well. One, declare bankruptcy. You're not going to sort yourself out of this one. That probably won't fly with leadership. So the other is to temporarily outsource it. Time box it, but put some third-party outsourced thing in place, throw bodies at the problem, and while you remove some operational time sinks, you can have your team focus on building some of the most important functions that you need out of your modern program. And then as you prioritize the technical capabilities you need, the inevitable question of build versus buy comes up. And I'm an engineer, I love to build. But here's what I would recommend. Find a solution that gets you 65% of the way there right now. And that doesn't mean that you ignore basic principles like we're proactive, it needs to be integrated with threat intel, we prioritize automation. Those still hold true, but if you buy a solution that gets you 65% of the way there, then your team can focus on building the program specifics. And of course, while you build, you've still got your incident and operations. But like I said, being busy gives the appearance that your program is detecting just fine. And so we'll talk about how you can change that perception as we evaluate and report. And just like we had legacy and modern, I think some of you may even have modern programs, but may still be falling into legacy methods of evaluating and reporting, which is causing you to not get the support and funding you really need to succeed. And when I say legacy, I mean that you're still thinking reactive by assuming that time to detect, time to respond, and time to contain is all there is to report. When I say legacy, it's when your report to leadership is the number of events that happened this month in comparison to last month. That doesn't mean anything. And overall legacy reporting doesn't tell the business the value of your program. They know bad stuff happened. They know more bad things happened last month compared to this month, and that you're very busy. While modern, it provides context to the numbers. What are the associated threats? What environments could be impacted? Where is their visibility? And it quantifies these, at least in a narrative, to business risk. And so real quick, we'll talk about 4 ways to evaluate and report. I talked a lot about observability. Here's 3 questions I think that can get you there. What can we detect today? So what threats can we see? What can't we see? What's our landscape coverage? And then take both of those and ask, what's my overall visibility? And we talked about micro purple tests. So here's an example of running tests across the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And the story to this slide here is that This program has great coverage of discovery and C2 techniques, but an attacker might be able to move laterally, and that could be bad. What's the bad? This business story here is that if you have poor controls between environment boundaries. And next, you can look at running all those techniques in all your different landscapes. Here our story is that this organization has pretty good endpoint coverage, but no visibility into containers where all the business apps run. And then if you sum it all up and look at your overall visibility, look at the things that you can validate with micropurple tests, look at the things that you can't validate, and then look at your gaps, and you can give a picture of what your visibility is. And then if we look at metrics real quick, we know what we can see. What threats are we seeing the most and where? Which ones pose the biggest threats to the business? And what preventative controls can fix that? So instead of giving meaningless numbers, you can talk about top threats, top landscapes at risk, and top incident trends. And speaking of incidents, a valuable tool is to walk through a narrative. So consider a scenario where a user reports a suspected phishing, and the scenario goes well. Your team triage in a timely manner. They find the email is indeed malicious. They look to see who the recipients are. They do a threat hunt looking at the IOCs. They find additional victims. They isolate hosts. It's great. But consider those things don't go well. Your narrative can highlight where you have wins and where you don't have wins. And then finally, we have the roadmap, which tells you going forward, here's our asks. We have the data to support where you need to reduce the gaps and the risk of threats to the business. So here we are. We've gotten an understanding of the current state. We've talked about design and development, how to get it done. And now, instead of hiring based on the number of alerts or investigations, you can make data-driven detections instead of threat hunting, because it sounded cool. You know what you need to do to have success. And instead of buying what Gartner says you need, you have a vision for your architecture. And instead of telling your bosses, yeah, we might detect it, you have metrics to describe your threat coverage. So now you've learned to stop worrying and build a modern detection and response program. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me in email or check out my regular, semi-regular newsletter. And I'll hang around at the side area for a little bit if anyone has any questions. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.